Right, let's talk to Ben Habib, because he's a man that knows a thing or two about the European Union, and I'm sure he will agree with me that it all started with Tony Blair, and it hasn't got any better since then. Ben, very good morning to you.
Good morning. Tony Blair is the purveyor of all evil. Everything we suffer in this country at the moment is as a result of Tony Blair laying the foundations for it. I mean, I'm not even joking. I mean, I think the man is the personification of the devil when it comes to the Constitution of the United Kingdom.
Yeah,
Awful
I mean,
man.
He did change things in a way which we didn't even know. It was almost like one of those movies where this is a guy who puts these sort of sleeper cells into things that will only you'll only discover it like 10 years later, like the Supreme Court and all of that. You know, Peter Hitchens talks about it all the time. He says, you know, we didn't really know at the time, except he did, what damage he was doing to our constitution, to our sovereignty, to our ability to govern ourselves. And, you know, this is where we are. And Keir Starmer is dragging us now back in. I know that we can talk about immigration and Keir Starmer, but let's talk actually about next week, because next week is going to be a European summit in London where Keir Starmer is about to sell Britain off once again for the purposes of his own ideology back into Europe.
Absolutely. I mean, we never left Europe, of course. If we had properly left the European Union, he wouldn't be able to take us back in. It's because that we've been sitting quite closely alongside the EU, particularly Northern Ireland, and in areas like state aid, competition, environment, employment law. We've been tracking the EU quite closely. And of course, they've infected our fishing waters as well. You know, they send their horrible factory boats in to hoover up our fish and damage our marine environment. All this has been going on since we ostensibly left the EU. But the problem with Starmer is that he is, like Blair, a complete Europhile. He doesn't see the governance of the United Kingdom through a prism of delivering prosperity and protection and celebrating everything that's British and prosperity for our people and so on. He sees governance through the European Union. And he was in favour of a second referendum. He would have reversed the vote in 2016. He would have ignored the vote, given half a chance. And I think the really telling thing was that as recently as September 2023, he was in Montreal when he thought he was off the cameras, but he was being recorded. And he said that if I ever become Prime Minister, I will align the United Kingdom so closely with the EU, no one will be able to tell the difference. And that's precisely what he's doing. You know, under the cloak of a need to now cooperate, as he calls them, our European friends and partners in defence, we're going to have to be nice to them, hand over more of our fishing waters to them, give them greater rights, allow freedom of movement, align ourselves with sanitary and phytosanitary EU regulations, allow the European Court of Justice to have even more say over the United Kingdom. That's the kind of line he's going to take. And the reality is, Mike, that there's no good going to come out of any of the arrangements that he calls his reset. It'll be giving away of more sovereignty from the United Kingdom, removing our borders when it comes to the use of the EU, which is just a thin end of a wedge, which will then allow greater freedom of movement with the European Union. That's bound to come later down the line. He'll give up even more of our fishing waters. You know, our fishing waters used to produce in 1913 something like 3 million tons of fish. And now they produce under 1 million tons of fish, much of which is taken by the European Union, and very, very damaged by the EU common fisheries policy. It would be better, I'm digressing, but it's a really important point, actually. It would be better for us to eject the European Union boats out of our fishing waters and not fish the waters at all, and let the fish replenish over the next few years. Anyway, he's not going to do that. He's going to give them more rights to come into our waters for greater periods, taking greater catches. Everything is going to be a sellout. Everything is going to be a sellout in this reset. And
I don't wish to be too over-dramatic here, but I see the European Union, the more I think about it, like Spectre. You know, this kind of, you know, nasty, awful, kind of criminal gang which is organised on a multinational level in James Bond movies, right? And you see, Ursula von der Leyen's not a very convincing, bad guy, but she kind of is, because they're so protectionist, they're so irregular in the way that they operate, that they are like a sort of protection racket. And
they are a protection racket.
If you don't do what they want, they will punish you, as they punished us for leaving the European Union back in 2016 for the vote to leave, as they punished us ever since. And now, as we're seeing, with Starmer even like going there cap in hand, he's getting his arse spanked, quite frankly. Literally taking him and kicking him around and going, well, it's all very well if you want to come back in, but we're going to demand even more from you. For example, as you say, the freedom of movement is not just the freedom of movement for people under 30, it's now people under 40, and now they're saying they want any kids who are coming here to go to university to get reduced university fees, and then they want even more fishing rights, and so if we give them that, which he probably will, because he's the worst negotiator in history, we'll end up having to they'll be asking for even more, won't they?
Yeah, I'm not even sure he is a bad negotiator. I think he will do this willingly, Mike. It's in his ideology. He's going there in order to do what he thinks is in the interests of global prosperity, the European Union, and his desire to be as close to the European Union as possible.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. The EU is an evil organization. It wouldn't recognize our legitimate democratic right to leave the EU pursuant to its own rules. It said that the price of leaving the European Union would be giving up part of our territorial giving up Northern Ireland, giving up part of our territory to the EU, which is precisely what we then did. We gave up our fishing waters. We aligned ourselves in all sorts of ridiculous ways, including in net zero, making an international treaty commitment on net zero, committing to staying in the European Convention of Human Rights and so on. But I think one of the worst things he's going to do next week, one of the worst things he's going to do is say that in the pursuit of the protection of Europe against, an expansionist Russia, an imperialist Russia, we must cooperate militarily. And he's going to take us into the European Defence Union, which is not like NATO. It is not independent sovereign countries coming together and deciding to work together as independent sovereign countries. It will be the subjugation of British military to Brussels direction. It will be the acceptance of all EU foreign policy. We will not be able to challenge the EU on foreign policy. We will be subsumed into an interoperable European military. That means we won't have an independent defence. We won't be making decisions for the defence of our own country. That's how damaging it's going to be, Mike. And people haven't really woken up to this. I've been saying it for a bit, but somehow defence, as critical as it is to our nation, somehow it doesn't capture people's attention. But, if I could shake the United Kingdom and say, please wake up, we're about to give our military away to Europe. It's absolutely abominable.
Yeah, it really is. And you have no confidence, do you, as I don't, in Keir Starmer managing to keep a hold of what is true and sovereign to our nation. Ben Habib, I've got to run. Sorry. I'd love to talk to you for more. We'll get you back on for some more time very, very soon. Former Brexit Party MEP, now